Ready to go. My name is Mats Johansson. I'm the founder and chairman of Stockholm Frivärld Forum, who is your host for this occasion today. I sincerely hope we will have an enlightening conference. We should all be outside in the sun, of course, but I think the topic of this conference is more important perhaps than what we will lose from not being in the sun. Over the weekend, I spent the weekend in Tallinn, which is a very good thing to do, especially if you're invited by President Ilves to the Lennart Meri conference. Funny thing happened. Most of the speakers in Tallinn wanted to come here, so I'm very glad for that. So, dear guests, ministers, ambassadors, fellow politicians, former colleagues of the media, and the rest of you, you're equally welcome to this conference. It's our first, actually, so please, if we have made any mistakes, don't blame us too much. But our hope is at the Frivärld Forum that this will be a tradition. We think there is a growing interest for the matters we are about to discuss here in Sweden. We not only think that, we know, because we've made a recent opinion poll. For the first time in 10 years, the issue of defense and security is on the list. Usually when you ask Swedes how important is this issue of defense and security, you get 0%, almost. I think we are in a new situation now in Sweden. This is the week to start a discussion, serious discussion about what should be done. And you know that on Friday, our Defense Review Committee will publish its report, telling the ordinary Swedish voter what is going on around the Baltic and the rest of the world. So it's a very important week for us all. Those of you who have not yet read Dagens Nyheter of today can read an article, an enlightening article on page 11 by Eva Stenberg, ruling out the political controversies that we will see some results of on Friday. So, with these words, I will now leave the word to Artis Pabriks, very welcome, Minister of Defense, to tell us something about what we are expected to meet, those of us who are interested in these issues. The Lennart Meri conference in Tallinn, as I said, is a good place to find out what the trends are in these matters. And my expression, my feelings after this conference was that there is a new realism regarding the view on Russia. If those of you who were in Tallinn and will speak later today have another opinion, please state so. But this new realism needs to be protected and promoted also in Sweden. Isn't that so, Mr. Pabriks?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for being able to speak today in Stockholm, in Sweden, and in this distinguished forum. And I understood from speakers that all who want to sit on front have to sit here, but it appears that I'm the only one who wants to do that. So I have to enjoy probably my loneliness for a while here. I was, differently from most of you, I probably was not in Lennart Meri conference this time in Tallinn, simply did not have enough time. But I believe that all those things which have been discussed over there, we will be able to check a few months later in Riga conference in September, where we will continue on the same issues. And if you will allow me, just to introduce me you approximately with few things which I would like to touch upon in this discussion today. And I think I will start with more general version, which you all know, and then I will slowly go to more particular regarding the issues, first of all, around the Baltic Sea, Baltic-Nordic cooperation or not cooperation, the situation in the Baltic countries and in Latvia, and how does it all reflect on the security, defense, and international politics in the region in general. And if I have to start with general patterns, I think we still have to mention a few of them. The first, we are looking all very frequently lately to the United States. And we know the latest announcements that United States are refocusing more on Pacific. It is either mentioned as a change of pivotal role or pivot or direction, or there are some other definitions to this. But looking from the Baltic perspective, looking from the Latvian perspective, I think that independently on what American side is telling, for us it seems quite clear that in the following decade or so, the American presence in European continent might diminish. And that might be for a number of reasons. First of all, it's obvious that United States is not only transatlantic country, it is trans-Pacific country. United States always have been involved in Pacific, and Pacific at this moment is becoming a little bit more rough. So it's very clear that United States will focus a little bit more in this direction. At the same time, all the world is experiencing economic crisis. And I think it's quite fair to understand that even if Americans are the largest country, militarily the most developed country, the most investments are going from compared to all other countries in America to military, it still cannot focus all the time on all the things, because if you have all the priorities in the world, you do not have any priority. And additionally, I think to this, a European attitude towards security and defense is actually decreasing capability of us to convince American citizens and voters and taxpayers to give more assistance to Europe. Because if I would be American, I would honestly ask, why should I provide something more to Europe if Europeans are rich enough, despite of crisis, but they are simply unwilling to do something for their defense. And I think that here there is some large piece of truth. Because after the Second World War, the following generations in most of European countries simply decided that security is given mainly by God, or by nature, it depends on your position or philosophy, or sometimes by Americans. And people simply cannot imagine in European continent that some crisis, some wars or something like this really can happen to them. It is all bound to some other regions and not to the European region, not to the European continent. And from that perspective, I think it's very clear that the new generations, by not seeing threats or by unwillingness to see threats, they simply eventually disarm. And this is, if I'm using, and I promised to some of our colleagues not to be very diplomatic in this meeting, because it's not a meeting among ministers and prime ministers, etc. It's a meeting about thinkers, among thinkers. So I think I have to tell how we feel. We feel that Europe is disarming. Europe is not feeling threatened by anything. And I think it is a wrong feeling. It is a wrong feeling because if we remember that European civilization's history goes back to maybe 2,500 years. Do you ever remember the times where people could wake up in the morning, open their doors, open their windows and tell, nothing is threatening me, I feel so good, so good, so good, so just I don't need anything to be afraid of. It's just deceiving feeling. And if we do not have such type of threats what we experienced during the First World War or during the Second World War. Yes, tanks are not rolling over our borders and probably they will not roll. There is very small possibility of that. It still doesn't mean that there are no threats. There are questions about energy security, there are questions about radicalism, about terrorism, there are questions about cyber attacks, there are questions about soft power, there are questions about the information space. So it simply changes. And we have to notice these changes and see them timely if we do not want really to experience some concrete dangers to our security. Now, the next thing which is worrying us is the general development in the European Union. Because looking from the Baltic perspective, I can tell you how I was feeling when we just attempted to enter the European Union, or we entered the European Union in 2004. And I was at that time quite skeptical about all ideas which were connected to federalism, to deepening maybe more European Union cooperation. Yes, we should be part of European Union, but we still should preserve that independence what we have, what we gained 20 or so years ago. And I would say that I personally changed my mind very much. I am now coming from so-called new European Union country. I don't know how long we will be still new, but from new. I'm coming from so-called Eastern European country, which I also disagree with definition, but this is how it's understood for some of our friends still. And I'm becoming more and more federalist. And when I'm going to Central or Western Europe, then everybody is looking at me and telling, you are again in the wrong carriage, because we don't speak about federalism anymore. We now speak about referendums, how to exit European Union. It's about our British friends, or we speak about some parties which are rising, even in Germany. Imagine, even in Germany, which are telling we should exit Eurozone. And then these a little bit crazy Latvians, you know, they are telling from 1st of January 2014, we want Euro. So we don't understand you, except that maybe we have such a high level of solidarity that we still want to keep Greeks on their current economic level by paying from our small pensions to sustain their lifestyles in Southern Europe. So something is wrong here probably with these understandings. But looking from the Baltic perspective, things are not so wrong. Because we still remember what Ahtisaari told in Finland when Finland joined the European Union. He told, if anything is happening within European Union and where people are sitting at the same table, Finns should be there. And in my personal view, this applies exactly also to Latvians. If something is happening in the European Union, we should be at the table and we should participate in those negotiations, because if we do not do this, then we are out of discussions and we are out of possibility to influence something. And you know, once you are in Stockholm, you still have few hundred kilometers additionally, but to us in Riga, 250 kilometers to the east from Riga, Europe, how we understand this with Western civilization, with free democracy, with liberal views, this is where the border ends. This is where this civilization ends. So we are basically a frontier country, a border country, and if European Union, if the European continent is failing, we will be the first ones to see the consequences, and very harsh consequences, differently from Spain, Portugal, Italy, or some other countries which are much further. And believe me, here across the sea in Gotland and Sweden, you will not remain untouched by those changes as well. So they will influence the Nordic countries as well, very much. So this is my maybe first message to which I can be more elaborative a little bit later. Now, if we are looking to the Baltic Sea region, within this scope of previously mentioned problems, what are our answers to these issues, either security-wise or from the perspective of international policy? I think that the first thing is we have to be vocal, because a number of those things which are actual to us are not actual to some other member countries in NATO or European Union. That means we have to keep them aware about this. So if, for instance, American presence is going to decrease, it's not going to disappear, but if it is going to decrease, it is first of all a problem for us. And if Americans are even declining this and trying to say to Baltic countries that this thing will not happen and they will be still here, in some way, yes, we believe what Americans are saying, but we can see that monies are decreasing, their participation or their numbers in, for instance, our military exercises are decreasing, and they probably will decrease. So some facts are still speaking in favor of our assumption. Secondly, if European Union is going through turmoil, one of the positive answers, what we could do here, is a better regional integration. And this is my second message, and this is what I stand for. I think that we have been doing a great job speaking about the Baltic-Nordic cooperation in the last 20 years. So we first moved to 5+3, then we moved to Nordic 8, But I think it's now time to move further. And when I am speaking with my Baltic colleagues in Tallinn and in Vilnius, I intentionally change my lexics, my language and my definitions where I'm speaking not about cooperation, but about integration. I know that this is a hard topic also in the Nordic countries because there is a lot of questions how Nordic countries should cooperate among themselves, what is a point of view of Nordic Council, how we can see this, all the developments among the 5 countries, but I think it's vital that the Nordic-Baltic region is becoming closer and mutually integrated. And I'm not speaking here only about some big, huge projects where we need involvement of prime ministers or presidents or whoever, but I think we should start on all levels, starting from local authorities, starting from concrete small plannings, either between the ministries or between the institutions, and then proceeding. Because time is slowly running out, and we don't know what rough waters we will experience in the next decade or so, and obviously if something, let's say, for me as a defense minister, it's important to speak about the worst scenarios, because about better scenarios or good scenarios, I can simply lie back and relax. It's not a problem for me. But I have to be prepared for the worst scenarios. And if we are looking to our neighborhood, then let's say optimists or idealists, they might say, look, there is no any more danger coming from our eastern neighbors, Russia, Belarus, countries in the former Soviet sphere, because we can't imagine that they would occupy the Baltic countries or cross our borders militarily. In many ways, they're right. We feel relatively safe, and I would say we feel perhaps the most safe in 20th century or 21st century. We never before felt so safe. But there are still challenges which we are not ready to tackle. Because imagine the situation where one day a regime of Lukashenko is falling. What we will do with our borders, what will happen at our borders. Imagine the day where some turmoil is happening in Russia. Why not? I mean, Russia and Belarus, these are not democratic countries according to European standards. They are different countries, they are authoritarian countries. And this is true. So if people suddenly decide that they want some changes in this region, that will very much affect Baltic countries and Nordic countries. So we have to be prepared for this. Thirdly, if we are looking, for instance, to my direct responsibility, the military responsibility, yes, we know that Russians are smart people. We know that Russia sees also the rise of the East and Asia, and they are allocating a lot of their forces in Caucasian region, in the region of towards Central Asia, in the region of Pacific and Asia in general. But it doesn't disturb them from increasing also their presence in the Western districts. So the general rise of military every year in Russia is between 8 and 12%, while Denmark is decreasing its support to military for 15%. Most of the countries are decreasing it in the European Union and NATO. So it's basically becoming more disbalanced situation with every year. And if I have to quote some classics, we can easily say that there are no times where disarmed and rich countries are prevailing for a very long period of time next to the authoritarian and militarized countries. At one point, the balance is shifting. So do we have to wait for this, let's say, possible scenario or challenge without being prepared for that? Here I have to also speak about issues as power in general. And if I'm speaking here about the hard power, what more defense ministers are used to speak, I have to mention also such issue as a soft power. Last time in Riga conference last year, we had a small disagreement with President Ilves from Estonia, where I was mentioning that soft power of Russia is increasing. And here I would suggest you to read also the latest article of Edward Lucas in European Voice about this. While President Ilves was opposing, telling that there is no soft power of Russia because it's simply a corruption, and if you speak that corruption is a soft power, it would not be totally correct. I still disagree with him because every country wants its soft power. Every country has a legitimate right, let's put it correctly, legitimate right to increase its soft power in other regions because we want to look good. If we are going out of the house, we are also dressing up and we want to look good. So it's the same with the countries. But the soft power of Russia is different in United States, Britain, and France from that Russian soft power what is in the Baltic countries and maybe partly also in the Nordic countries. Because in the Baltic countries, first of all, we have a history of our occupation where we have been living under the Soviet rule for decades. Secondly, we have a sizable minority of Russians to whom their even ethnicity, language, and just traditional culture is keeping more binded to, let's say, that soft power which is coming from the East. And thirdly, this soft power, what Russia is using, starting with such channels as Russia Today, and ending with all the local channels and newspapers which they are increasingly purchasing in the Baltic countries, is connected simply with an idea how they can influence the political events in these regions, how they can influence the local elites, and how they can influence political parties and ordinary citizens. And basically, the power, according to definition, is an ability to influence your opponents, colleagues, or friends to do whatever you want to do. So there is a good chance that by such type of soft power, Russia is capable of influencing politics in the regions which are very close to the Nordic countries. And let's be honest, if I want, I have to be also critical towards my own population, because since we are coming, or large part of our population is coming from still former Soviet Union 20, 25, 30 years ago, the political culture of democracy, of liberalism, is not so well based as it is maybe in some Western countries. So there is more appeal for authoritarian solutions, there is more critics about democracy, so this soft power can land easily in the minds of people in the Baltic countries or in so-called post-Soviet arena of politics, international politics, and maybe in the West. Additionally to this, then I would like to ask to my Swedish or Nordic colleagues, where is your soft power in the Baltics? Because if you are speaking about the influences, for us it's important that this soft power or hard power is balanced power, also in our region. And we increasingly see the disbalance in favor of Russia and not in favor of the West or of the Nordic countries. And if we speak about the soft power of Sweden or Nordic countries, I must be also relatively critical, because if we are looking to the post-crisis situation in Latvia, believe me, a lot of people, objectively or subjectively, that's another reason, but a lot of people are still angry to the Nordic banks about what happened. So this is not improving the situation in people's minds, a positive impression about the Nordic countries. So there are a number of such things where I think we have to pay more attention. For instance, also the media issue. If you're speaking about media issue, we have been interested to have a balance. We don't want to watch in Tallinn, Riga, or Vilnius too many channels from Russia or from Moscow, not because they are not interesting, but because they carry with them not only nice movies about the Second World War and 9th of May, but they carry with them also the specific ideological messages for people and specific behaviors if you speak about political culture. You know what I mean as a political scientist. So where are those Swedish movies? Where are those Danish movies? Where are those German movies? Where is this lifestyles, what you want to sell, what you want to show? Increasingly what we see that our media is dominated by the Nordic countries. But those media which are dominated by the Nordic countries, they are going just behind money, like every business. And to go just behind money is sometimes easier to buy a Russian movie and simply reproduce it in the Baltic countries. Thank you very much. This is not what we would like to see from media which is dominated by Nordic countries, and this is not what we want to see by businesses which are dominated by the Nordic countries. It's a serious problem in our region. Now I'm slowly going... slowly have to finish probably. I'm slowly going also to our possible security and military cooperation. If we are speaking about possible threats, I have to mention a few things where we are, let's say, more worried in general today than maybe 5 years ago. One thing would be exercises, military exercises and maneuvers taking place close to our borders. Zapad, previous one, Zapad exercises which will take place this year, they are obviously an offensive exercises. So it would be, of course, naive, in my view, to disagree in maybe a little bit softer terms, but still to disagree with what Il was told in Lennart Meri conference. Because if you are living in a house and you can see that your neighbor is all the time exercising how to open your door, so don't tell that this is without security threats to your existence in your house. There is something. Secondly, if you are speaking about our own maneuvers, NATO maneuvers in the Baltic countries or regional maneuvers, they have been always in a size much smaller. At least 2-3 times smaller, and secondly, they had totally different purposes. The worst thing what is worried me is that, for instance, if we are speaking about our upcoming maneuvers in Baltic Steadfast Jazz in autumn, that some of our NATO countries are actually hesitant to provide enough boots on the Baltic soil. So I was speaking very vocally to my friends and colleagues within NATO in Europe, telling, listen, those times of 1941 or 1914 are over. We want to see more of your boots on our soil. Please bring them. Unfortunately, the answer is, we do not have really capacity. Honestly speaking, I don't believe that there is no such a capacity because the geography is very close. My view is simply there is a nice diplomatic talks again going on over our heads or around us, where simply people do not want to challenge Russia in this case by providing too many troops in such type of exercises. And this is what I told also to General Secretary Rasmussen. If we cannot provide enough good troops for such type of exercises in the Baltic countries, you are not humiliating Baltic countries. You are humiliating NATO as an organization because it simply makes an impression that we are incapable to do the things. It's a wrong message. It's a wrong message because some people around, they do not understand soft messages, unfortunately. They understand soft messages as a weakness. That's the biggest problem for us. And so we are used to different cultures where we cannot put these things together if you want the same message. Now, of course, every country and every region has a right for military exercises. So we are not against that. But we would like at least to have a good cooperation with our neighbors, which means we are open to Russian colleagues, to Belarusian colleagues to come as observers, to see what we are doing, to give the information, but we would like to have reciprocity. Unfortunately, we can't see that reciprocity up to now. It's not coming here. Flights, reconnaissance, different type of things which are happening here. I don't need to remind you what happened lately also close to the Swedish shores. You know yourself. But in the last 2 years, the flight numbers around our territory and close to our territory increased immensely, 2 times and more if compared to the previous years. Thirdly, what is very much worrying us, it is also the tactical changes in Russian military close to our borders. And I'm speaking here about Ostrova, where they are planning to station their helicopter units, which will be able to operate very quickly and very smoothly in a very short period of time. Is there any possibility of good answer for that? That remains still questioned at this moment in the region. Now, if I have to slowly come to the end, and I really hope for discussion and questions. If I'm speaking about Swedish position, I very much enjoy, and sorry if you see it as a little bit as a critics, but I very much enjoy that Sweden is telling, Sweden is not threatened, and if something will happen to Sweden, which is not very likely, NATO will help. Yes, NATO will help, but what Sweden can give in return? That's a question. And I think if Swedish existence outside NATO is this idea that we don't need to join because we will get the assistance anyway, I don't think it's a very fair assumption. I think it should be based on a relationship just like between people. If we want to receive something, we also should give something. That's number one. Because, I mean, Latvia as a NATO country obviously will be willing to help Sweden if there will be some danger. I'm just afraid that these problems will come at once. So if something will happen in the Baltics, that will affect Nordic countries in the same way. And I think if we want really to speak seriously about our cooperation, we must be opening all the doors and deleting all the hindrances to such cooperation. And I think, bluntly speaking, the Swedish unwillingness to join such organization as NATO is actually hindering the regional cooperation. It's hindering also bilateral cooperation. Because how can we cooperate, for instance, as far as air policing, if we cannot share information, if we cannot exercise together? And seeing the increasing flights along the Baltic region, it is very clear that those 4 planes which are stationed in the Baltic countries, 4 NATO planes, they're actually 2 less. They're 2 less. We sometimes need maybe more planes, and we would be very happy if Finland or Sweden could assist from time to time with such things. But how can we do if we are not capable of sharing cooperation? It's also about the mutual cooperation. Our national guards, our military forces would be extremely interested to increase bilateral cooperation with exercises, with simply friendship. We can just jump into the ferry and come across here, you know, in half a day with all what we need, and vice versa. We'll be very happy to bring also some Swedish troops to Latvia. This is actually a message which I can give directly, but we need to work on that, how we are doing this. We have a very good cooperation with Finland and Sweden now, and Norway in Mazar Sharif in Afghanistan, and we are happy about this, that we have a Nordic-Baltic cooperation in Afghanistan, which for some weird reason eventually was called first Nordic Plus. And then I came to complain to your minister and some other Nordic ministers, telling that thank you that you call me plus and I'm not a minus, but I think it's rather a Nordic-Baltic cooperation. So we changed this diplomacy one. But I think that this cooperation, what we have in Afghanistan, assists also us bilaterally and trilaterally here in the region. So let's do something more here. Let's be honest to what we can expect from NATO, what we can't expect from NATO. Let's be honest to what we can expect from each other. And let's understand one thing, that if we speak about increased Baltic-Nordic cooperation, which from my perspective is inevitable and which is very needed, it must also be in the field of security and defense. Either it is cyber defense, where we are establishing now a company in our national guards and where we are devoting a serious attention, or it is an information space, or it is energy policy, or it is just traditional hard security cooperation. So these are the things that we really have to discuss openly without trying to rely on historical lessons of 100 years. I think time is changing, and if we want that our lives do not change in Baltics or Nordics, we have to change, because that's the only key. If we do not want that things are changing, we have to change ourselves. At this point, I will stop. Sorry if my presentation was not totally coherent from one point to another, but I still believe there will be enough reasons to question some of these concepts. Isn't that the question why we are here? Thank you.
Thank you, Artis. While you get another microphone, let me thank you especially for your frankness and a straightforward talk. I think now is the time to be somewhat more straightforward and frank about these issues. I would like also to take the opportunity to say a special welcome to Henrik Landerholm, my old friend from young days, who is the newly appointed Swedish ambassador to Riga. And his learning curve has just started to rise sharply. And I advise you to take well care of Mr. Landerholm when he appears in your country. And Henrik, maybe you should answer the question about Swedish soft power in the Baltic states and Latvia. We were asked, what is the Swedish soft power? And I could, of course, add what is the Swedish hard power in the Baltic states. But to give you the chance to present yourself, what can an ambassador do, really, when it comes to this field? Is it the very whole point of being an ambassador in a country these days. We have great example of what an ambassador is not allowed to do. If we look at our friend Stefan Eriksson in Belarus, who was expelled because he did too much when it came to soft power there. But can you give us a short reflection on, as a not yet ambassador, what can be done?
Thank you so much, Mats. I wasn't really prepared at all to answer this question. I can answer one thing, though, based on my experience from another part of the world, namely Afghanistan, where I spent the last 18 months. The last months, actually, very pleasant stay also together with Latvian soldiers that have definitely served with honor. I do believe that there is an important role for ambassadors to play, but they are just sort of the tip of the iceberg of activities and engagement from wider parts of society. And I do believe that business and culture has an extremely and big important role to play. And what an ambassador could be is more or less a facilitator of other means and measures, and creating a good mix, a cocktail of instruments that can promote the interests not only of the country in such, but for the promotion of interest from both countries. What I did a few weeks ago, or actually last week in Mazar-e-Sharif, was doing something very different from an Afghan perspective, namely introduced a cultural event with the aim to raise the awareness for women's rights. So we actually did produce an event which is called Seven, based on 7 stories of seven women that was read by 7 different important regional personalities, in that sense enhancing one of the most important Swedish interests in Afghanistan, but also giving a wider audience in that part of the country a possibility to see to experience this.
Thank you, Henrik, and good luck over there. When do you start, actually? September the 4th, okay. Questions to Artis Pabriks, and while you raise your hands, I say a word of special welcome also to Gunnar Hökmark at the end, who just won the internal test election in the moderate party to top the list for the elections to the European Parliament.
Hello, Charlie Salonius Pasternak. I work at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for a great presentation. Comment and then a question. You were asking about kind of, I'd call them information operations from Russia in the Nordics. In Finland, there's an obvious and clear increase in them for the last 2 years at least. And it seems to be gaining more and more official tones, as it were. With the establishment of a new research institute in Helsinki for this purpose. My question is, from your minister perspective, what are the things you'd like to see be developed in Nordic defense cooperation, in NORDEFCO? I understand one of the key things is you'd like to become an integral part of it as opposed to more ad hoc, but are there specific issues you'd like to see addressed more?
Well, I think that one of the important things are connected with our possibility of interoperability among the countries. And we are fighting this issue also among the Baltic states, because in the last meeting of defense ministers of all 3 Baltic countries, which was in winter in Latvia, we agreed, for instance, to bolster our common defense planning of all 3 countries. And I think this is a great success for us, because we never ever in history had such a thing before. So at this moment we have people from all 3 countries from time to time gathering in Riga and making a common defense planning, which is obviously, I mean, we are one region. We cannot plan defense just on the basis of a nation state. I think that it's important that we are developing possibilities with Finland and Sweden regarding the issues of military exercises. I think it's highly important that we are exchanging information and finding ways how we can cooperate on cybersecurity, because our defense capabilities, and with our I mean every country, I would say in the world, are much smaller than possible offense capabilities. I think we should also explore how can we proceed further with issues of international military cooperation, starting with United Nations, European battle group issues, which let's say, it's a separate issue. I'm a little bit skeptical about this at this moment, but for different reasons. And yes, I think we simply have to find a way what we can do in the short period of time while, let's say, Finland and Sweden is not a member of NATO. And of course, my personal interest, I will not hide it. It's for us, it is very vital and crucial that this discourse about possible NATO membership is going on in the region, that this is not buried, because I will once more repeat what I told in Lennart Meri conference last year. If Sweden and Finland is not members of NATO, this is hindering our military cooperation, and this is hindering also security. So we can, in some way, we can say it is decreasing security in the region. And I would say that if Nordic countries are very famous with its participation traditionally in different type of international organizations, where you traditionally had a very good representation. So what is that? What is keeping you away from being a part eventually one day also of this organization? If it's considered to be a threat, I don't think we can see NATO as a threat in general. So there is some kind of wrong perception. So I know that I'm entering now a bad waters, and I know that there is a lot of opposition, of course, also among my friends in Finland and Sweden to these issues. But who else should speak about this if not we? Because for us it is vital. For us it is crucial. So do not expect that Latvians, Estonians, or Lithuanians will be silent about the discussion in the Nordic countries about NATO membership. We cannot do this because these are our national interests.
Thank you. One good thing happened actually yesterday in Helsinki. Prime Minister Katainen told his people that now in Finland is the time to take the debate on NATO membership. That is very important for us in Sweden, because so far we have always been saying that let's wait for the Finns. Let the Finns go first. So I think it's a good time also for Swedish politicians to start this debate. If the Finns can have an open debate about NATO membership, why not the Swedes? And why not start now? Eller hur, Hans Wallmark, who is a member of the Defense Review Committee?
Yeah, well, thank you. But let's ask the minister if he can elaborate a little about the difference between the NATO discussion in Sweden and Finland. Is it more premature here in Sweden than in Finland, or is it better in one of the two countries, or is the same in both countries?
Well, I don't think I'm the good person to ask about this, because despite the necessity to follow the internal discussions in both countries, I'm still not aware of all the nuances, because once you go to Finland, then many people say we are looking to Sweden, and once you go to Sweden, many people are looking at Finland, and I think maybe we should stop looking at each other but do something. And from our perspective, we knew that before presidential elections in Finland, previous elections, this discussion would have a dead end. But now, of course, it is opening, and well, I think you should rather measure it yourself. I mean, because I think it's really fundamental question from the way how Nordic countries should think. If you think that you should be traditionally active internationally, and you should be not just takers but also givers, how can you eventually justify the argument that NATO should help you, but you will not help NATO? And if you are ready to help NATO, how can you do this if you are not a member country? I mean, basically, you are giving just a half answer to this. So there are a lot of things, just like I mentioned our air policing, where we cannot simply involve Finland and Sweden. Maybe there is a possibility to have a better cooperation once, for instance, Danish planes are guarding the Baltic sky from a NATO perspective. But if there are Italian, Spanish, or some other planes, I don't see any possibility for these planes to cooperate. I also don't see a chance how, for instance, these planes could take over the NATO mission, because I would be extremely happy for all those other, let's say, challengers to see what these countries now will do, where they will call. They will call to Brussels, they will call to Stockholm, Helsinki, what they will do if we will challenge them. And there is no good answer for this. So actually, all these chances of cooperation are deadlocked. And if, for instance, Sweden is now trying to get some liaison officers and people in Brussels and NATO, somebody would ask me, what is my answer to this? My first, let's say, emotional answer would be, I very much would like to see them there. But then, the next question would be, okay, if we simply take anybody who is applying, the third country which is applying, so next time there will be a bunch of countries which we maybe do not want to see there. So again, we cannot open Pandora box just like this. There must be different rules. So I think here, Sweden and Finland had bind their hands and legs together and still trying to have some kind of cooperation. Let's cut those Gordian nuts.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gunnar Hökmark here is not only a European parliamentarian, he was also the founder of the Monday movement here in Sweden. For those of you who are too young to know what the Monday movement was, it was, well, Gunnar, what was it?
Thank you very much. It was, well, it was a movement on Mondays. People meeting at the squares, mainly here in Stockholm, and expressing the, at that time, extremely radical idea that the Baltic states should be independent. That was seen as some sort of extremist from the beginning, but as with a lot of important and good ideas, it became true. Thank you very much, Minister. It's extremely refreshing to listen to your perspective and reflections regarding the debate about NATO in Sweden. As was said here earlier, it is not very much of a debate, and I think one of the reasons is that we do look rather much at the defense dimension, which is important and is the core, of course, of the NATO, but we tend to neglect the political dimension of NATO, and the fact that NATO, by its political dimensions, is also developing not only the soft power you touched upon, but also the political structures and framework, which in the next phase is of course also crucial for the core security situation in different kinds. I would like to ask you about how we are developing the political structures and the neighborhood of ours, because we are discussing now, of course, and this is the theme of the conference, the Baltic security. But speaking about soft power is of course extremely important what will happen in countries like Belarus, Ukraine, and of course more far away in the Eastern Partnership. And I think that it's very important to understand that to believe only in soft power is very naive. But soft power, on the other hand, also creates and paves the way for the political structures that in itself is also creating the defense alliances of different kinds. It will be interesting to listen to you what you think about this development of our neighborhood and what we can do in order to influence to keeping closer to us.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for those Monday gatherings and support, because at that time when you were gathering here, I was gathering in Riga. So everything what happened in the last 25 years, this is starting from my studying times when I was a student. So that country which we created, this is basically the country where I was growing up from 20 to my current age. I will not anymore tell how old I am. But regarding the soft power and our common neighborhood, You see, we are, if I'm looking critically to the Baltic countries and to Latvia also, I would say we are in some way in the middle of this transition, because we have been there where Belarus, Ukraine, Caucasian, Central Asian countries still are, but we are not totally yet there where we would like to be as far as our mentality, our understanding of democracy, our understanding of everything. Because once you speak about transformation, it's very easy to transform institutions. You can do it quite easily, I mean, in a shorter period of time. The biggest problem and challenge is to reconstruct the person's mind, to really make a person believe in those values. And I think that we are here having at least 2 or 3 problems. Because one thing is to try to make person be supportive for democratic ideals, for equality, for liberalism, for etc. And we can see that even in the Baltic countries, there is not anonymous support for these values. Because if you are looking, especially for those who are following, for instance, the soft power channels of Russia, seeing how efficient is the Russian government, because you see only efficiencies there. Putin is solving this problem, Medvedev is solving that problem, everybody is happy, you know, things are going. And then you're looking to the media of European Union or Latvian media and seeing that this politician is corrupt, that one cannot decide, here's the justice is you know, delayed, etc. So people are developing the feelings that authoritarian rules are sometimes better. Add to this economic aspects, where Europe is declining, United States is declining, and Asia is rising. Why should we say that democracy is much better? Can we really, do we still have as a West that power of conviction what we had maybe, or you had 20, 30 years ago? And this is affecting, again, less you, but more us. So if we are going to countries like Belarus or Central Asia or Caucasian states, we have to be extremely convincing. And the good part with Baltic countries is that, sorry to say, but these people to the east from us, they trust Baltic words much, much more than Swedish, German, English, or American words. And I frequently heard the questions, listen, go to your West and explain these people, how do we feel, what do we want? So they trust us, they don't trust so much you. So I think that the good idea is that we are combining our efforts in this work, and we are working together, trying to convince these people, extend our soft power. But then regarding Belarus, you see, I feel I'm a little bit hesitant here in general, because Belarus is our neighboring country. And I sometimes have a sense that in other Western countries, once we have to prove that we are really standing for freedoms, we are sometimes punishing the small ones, and we are neglecting the big ones. Lately somebody told, where's the difference between regimes in Minsk and Moscow? Is there a very huge difference as far as the freedoms? Why do we speak about the small ones and not about the big ones? If we really want, you know, make a change, we first have to encourage really population. We have to have a massive finances and offers to the people who could come to study to the West, which means Baltic countries, Nordic countries, Poland, etc. They see our lifestyles, they see what is good. So they are actually learning those things. By simply restrictions, embargoes, and not allowance to make contacts, this will not work. It maybe looks good for voters once you have to go for elections as a politician. I understand that very well. That's a good pattern, you know. You say, I'm tough to this regime and we will do something. But do you really make a change? You don't make a change with this. So I think that we really have to balance the stick and carrot policy, which sometimes is missing in the European Union understanding of countries in Central Asia, Caucasus, and also in Belarus and Ukraine. And the second thing is, let's be honest. I mean, if you really want a principled approach, don't punch only the small ones.
Okay. One final question. The word goes to Kurt Volker from United States of America.
Thanks very much, Minister. Thank you for your very frank remarks as well, too. I just had a simple question, which is, you've talked a lot about actions to which we should pay attention, what's going on. I'd like to ask you about intentions. So what do you think Russia's goals are? And in your mind, what is the worst case scenario that's realistic that we should be planning for looking ahead 5 years or so?
You mean about our region?
About the Baltic region. What? Because there's a lot of activity, but
Good.
really, what are intentions?
Well, those simple questions are the worst. But I have to take a little bit your time, if you excuse me. I was coming to Sweden yesterday after a very vivid discussion for 5 days about one element of the Russian soft power in Latvia. And I have to brief you about this. The small element was that we have some NGOs in Latvia which are connected with former Soviet military, which are gathering youngsters in my country and bringing them to Russia for military summer camps. So they're bringing them to military summer camps with some other countries. They're running around, shooting something. But among this shooting and running, there is a very strong ideological pattern. And if you are reading Russian, let's say, their own description, what these camps are about, then they are telling in a simple words that these camps are a part of a Russian complex vision how to increase its influence in neighboring countries, how to bring these countries back, and I'm basically quoting, how to bring these countries back in the former post-Soviet area with the dominance of Russia, where the Russian language is dominating, where the ideology is dominating, so they're not hiding this. And I think this gives a very good example what intentions are. So the intentions are not allow such countries as the Baltic countries to proceed smoothly further with those liberal democratic reforms which we initiated 25 years ago. So actually there is always a second agenda. If Russia is telling you should integrate so-called Russian speakers, that basically means Russia do not want that we integrate those Russian speakers in Latvia. They want to keep them in their own civilization, in their own ideology, in their own influence. And after we joined European Union, and particularly NATO, I think it's quite clear for Russia that there is very small probability that situation might change by force, let's say by hard power. But the very good situation would be if you would have such an extension of soft power, of influence in the countries, in Baltics, and maybe also some other countries, if European Union is retreating, starting with Poland, ending with Czech Republic and Hungary, and etc., where parties, politicians, NGOs, business circles would simply tell, you know, we don't need further to integrate in EU, we don't need to participate in some activities within NATO, we simply can look towards the east. We can go back because there is a good offer. There is money coming from, easy money, big money, there are people maybe happy. So this is the thing what they want to do. So once you would have a very positive governments in the Baltic countries, which are, let's say, very friendly to Moscow, it might be easier in the short period of time for some Western countries not to blame us anymore that we are troublemakers. But in the long term, that would simply decrease the influence of EU, the influence of Europe in these regions. And that's a major target. And then, of course, if some trouble is happening, which is not exclusive, because we know about Ossetia, we know about Abkhazia, we know about Transnistria, then for that reason we would have a hard power helicopters in Ostrava, where we can act very smoothly in 2 hours and we are there. And then after these guys, you know, in NATO, in Brussels, or in friendly countries in Sweden will gather together and decide, is this a fifth paragraph or not? And can we do something or not? And maybe the governments are guilty themselves, things will be done. And once you will be in the place, the question will be very simple. Will the West and NATO really risk to recreate the situation what it lost by not managing it before? So it is not like, you know, you're boiling the water and you are, sorry for environmentalists, and you are putting a frog there in, but it's rather a keeping frog in the lukewarm water and slowly boiling it up. So soft power is like slowly warming up water where you don't notice that you lose your freedom piece by piece, inch by inch. It's not in one day. You simply lose it and you wake up in the morning and you're not free anymore again. So that's the biggest problem for us. And we are not troublemakers. We really want to see Russia as a democratic, rich, prosperous, friendly country. But let's be realistic. This is not the possibility for the next decade. Thank you.